Welcome to Full Scope, a podcast designed to analyze the games that we love, the lines of music, the movies we can't forget. I'm your host, Windsor Burns. My counterpart, Savon Morris. He's on the road. Don't fear. Savon's corner is close by. He's not ducking all the smoke that me and Micaiah have for him for some of
Oh,
his.
we've got so much
I promise
smoke.
we have so much smoke for him, but he
So
is
much
on the
smoke.
way. He's on the way, and my guest, Micaiah Albert, he's been on many times in the past. Obviously, very happy because the Chiefs another annual visit to the Super Bowl. He's wearing the gear. Thanks so much for being on, man.
Absolute pleasure. It's so obviously so very good to be back on this episode of Full Scope. Looking forward to the Super Bowl and all the other topics that we have to discuss this week.
Yeah, man, definitely. And for this episode, obviously, we have a lot of football topics to get into, some NBA ones. We're going to do some album reviews, me and Savannah, and also a review of past lives in the last half. To start off with the Chiefs advancing past the Ravens and thoughts on kind of, Baltimore struggles. Kansas City won 17-10, and Travis Kelsey caught 11 passes for 116 yards and a touchdown. Mahomes went 30 of 39 for 241 yards and a touchdown. And early on, the Chiefs offense was extremely clinical. They set the tone early, which I think when you look at that second half, the offense isn't, able to convert touchdowns. But that first half, them setting the tone was so pivotal. And Lamar Jackson's performance, I don't want to overblow it and say, oh man, like he's not going to be able to get back to this point. But he had a lot of inaccurate throws to me in that game. And some I think were, obviously accentuated more with the Zay Flowers fumble and things of that nature. But to you, what did you kind of think about this game and how it played out?
Yeah, honestly, this was one that I had circled that I was definitely concerned. And maybe this sounds too overconfident, but like I was more concerned about this game than either of the possible Super Bowl matchups if we made it past the Ravens, honestly,
Wow.
just because Baltimore had looked like the best team in the NFL up
Oh yeah,
to AFC Championship Sunday because they had solidly drubbed both of the teams that were left in the NFC Championship side. They had handled the NFC, the 49ers, and they'd
yeah,
absolutely blown out the Lions. I mean, they blew both of them out. So it was just crazy to think that they were not the juggernauts that everyone was making them out to be. And I was absolutely shocked by the way the game went down. I really don't know like what Baltimore's offensive game plan was. You watch it and it's like they're an amazing run based team, run first. You've got amazing players that just didn't see touches. They saw I
yeah,
think the total team, I'd have to look it up, but I think they saw under 20 touches, their running backs to collectively.
yeah,
So that's just crazy to me as a team that has been so dominant in the run. And I feel like part of that has to do with the aura of the Chiefs, really, in that yes, the Chiefs have not looked great on offense,
you're right.
but everyone's got in the back of their mind they know that Mahomes is that guy, and they know that at any time he can whip out a perfect performance. And I think that's really what happened in this game. When you look at it, the Chiefs come out on their first two drives, boom, seamless move down the field, no problems. They look the most like the old Chiefs offense that they have all year.
Yeah,
And so I think what happened, honestly, is that the Ravens might have gotten baited into thinking, oh no, it's the old Mahomes. We're going to have to get into a shootout with them. And so, for whatever reason, because Wellington, they were only ever down by 10 points
that's what I'm
at any
saying.
time.
I don't understand the panic. I was like, you guys run the ball dominantly. Keep being you. Don't try to be the Chiefs. Like beat them at your game. Don't try to beat them at their game.
And the reason I think that I am going to say that they got suckered by the Chiefs' aura is because of the same week, and not to change the subject, but you look at the week before with Buffalo, they did
Right.
the same thing. They tried to run rather than now. I think the reason for Buffalo was twofold. They were worried about Josh making a big mistake because Josh has been very much up and down in a lot of big games, so he can make the big mistake that hurts you. He can also make the big play that will absolutely ignite it. So they're trying
Yeah.
to play safe and conservative to not put him in a situation where he could commit a turnover or a play that would hurt them. But in so and in also doing that, I think that they were trying to do what the Ravens should have been doing in running and trying to keep the ball away from Mahomes. The trouble is that the Bills were not dynamic enough on offense for that to really work once it got down to the red zone because they don't have, I think, the as good as Josh Allen is, he's not Lamar. And
You're right.
so it was just not the same in the red zone. And so for whatever reason, the Chiefs were able to tighten up with the Bills in the red zone, and it was kind of the same thing. So what I'm saying is basically in saying that is that the Bills got suckered into playing a different game than what is usually true to their style this year, and that's basically letting Josh be a superhero. And they
Yeah.
tried to distribute it, slow down the game, and the Chiefs. The say what you want, love them or hate them. The Chiefs are the kings at playing at whatever the pace is. They just don't get frazzled. They play at the pace. They have an excellent feel for the game and what that style of game is, and they just
Yeah.
match it. And I think that's what happened with the Ravens. Is the Chiefs came out, they played what they wanted on offense, and the Ravens got frazzled because they just in their heads they thought, okay, we've got to make up all this ground, and then they just didn't stop long enough to realize, hey, second half we're only down 10 points.
Yeah.
It's
No
not
need
like
to panic.
we're not like we're
Yeah.
getting massacred. Our defense started stepping up, started the second half like you mentioned. Chiefs didn't
Right.
really do a whole lot the second half. But and it just came down to exactly like you said. Lamar couldn't make the throws. And it's been our critique of Lamar to this point is just, regular season Lamar is not playoff Lamar. Playoff Lamar is a whole different kind of cat than what you get in the regular season. The regular season, two-time MVP, phenomenal. Well, let me rephrase. He one-time MVP. He's going to be this year's
It's
MVP.
going
I
to
would be
be,
shocked if
yeah, we
he's
all
not
know.
this. So, I mean, you might as well just say two-time MVP.
Yeah.
But with that even being said, he's won one game Wellington in the playoffs. And it just is like I don't even want to say that the moment is too big for him, but it's just like the level of game that the playoffs require. Lamar has not shown that he is able to play that style of game. For whatever reason, either poor coaching, because honestly, you could really boil down this game to it was poor coaching really more than it was
Yes.
Lamar's fault, because the coaching should know, okay, yes, we believe in Lamar. And that was the other thing that I wanted. I wondered if this wasn't a little bit of a pride thing for the Ravens and Lamar and trying to say, hey, we can go toe to toe passing with Patrick Mahomes. No, you can't. I'm
And
sorry.
that's
It's never gonna work. It's like why it's the same thing with the Patriots when they were in their dynasty. Why would you try and beat the other guy at their game? Play your game and win that way. Don't get suckered into playing what the other guy's trying to. That's what so many good teams is. They try and dupe you into playing their game, and you're not going to win at their game because they're the kings at their game. And I think that's what happened with the Ravens. Is if you want to call it egotistical or they just panic, either one. They just got suckered into playing exactly how I think the Chiefs wanted to do it. Because what is the Chiefs? As much as I love the Chiefs and as much as I love their defense, what is the strength of the Chiefs' defense? The secondary. And Lamar tried to dot him up. He had some good throws. He had some moments. But overall, you're just not throwing against this Chiefs secondary. Like you have to take what they give you. And
right.
honestly, what they give you is not usually a whole lot. You have to run the ball and try and loosen up room for the passing game that way. And that's why I was scared of this game, is because as good as our defense is, running definitely the rushing protection has been the weak point. But they never tried to exploit it, and so the pressure was never really on the Chiefs, and so it ended up being one of those games where, despite the final score, if anyone actually watched this game, the final score does not reflect how the game felt.
It
It
does.
never felt like this game was
Yeah.
close.
This was
I know it was
not
only a
a
seven
one
point game,
possession.
but
Yeah.
at no point did the Ravens feel like they were actually in this game, despite
Right.
it being only 7 points. Um, Let me rephrase: when they were driving with the Zay Flowers,
Oh,
and when he
that could have been game.
fumbled,
Yeah, that could have been
that was I thought at the same exact thing. Wellington is at that moment when he fumbled, I was like, "That's the game.
game.
That's a backbreaker right there." You finally had a good drive. You hurt yourself with the penalty, and maybe we'll talk about the
Right.
penalties later as a separate aspect. But then you lose to a phenomenal play by L'Jarius Sneed, All Pro. Not an All Pro corner. Should have been an All Pro in my opinion, Pro Bowl, but got snubbed because he doesn't have the name of a Jalen Ramsey, or other people that are out there. And yet he's allowed 3 touchdowns or fewer all year.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's neither here nor there. Makes a great play, punches it out, and I just thought the same is exactly what you just expressed. It's like that's the game. That's a backbreaker when you get such a good drive going, and then you just see it all go to pot basically there, and you actually have a turnover. That's a soul crusher for your team, and so that one was going to be hard to come back from. So and I'm saying all this, and I hate as a Chiefs fan, I don't want to take away from what the Chiefs did. I mean, this was, you mentioned the stats. It was not a flashy game by Mahomes, but it definitely was Kelsey's best game of the entire
Oh
year,
my goodness,
regular
Kelsey was
season,
phenomenal.
and is
Kelsey
just
was
like
phenomenal, man.
I was hearing something earlier in the week, and maybe you can react to this, but like, is the Mahomes Kelsey duo the most lethal playoff duel in NFL history?
And
It
I
sounds
never
crazy to
thought
say, but like when you look at their numbers,
like Brady
it's
Gronk.
crazy.
I
Yeah, but
maybe like no. What I'm saying is like I never thought Brady and like looking at what Brady and Gronk did, I was like, oh, these guys are going to be at the
it's the
top for years.
duo.
And then Mahomes and Kelsey come around like, oh, they're going to be the top. Like these are actually the guys now because Kelsey's got the
Yeah,
most receptions. I mean, you this connection, it's got to be at the top of the list.
because I mean, you're never going to be able to break Rice's playoff yardage just because that man went crazy. But I mean, Kelsey already broke his receptions in that game. Ended up tying him and then broke him the same game. He can, if Kelsey kept playing, I think for a year or two more, he can break Rice's touchdowns in postseason as well. So the only thing that Rice is going to have end up left standing, and the reason I'm saying this is because Jerry Rice is admittedly usually in terms of receivers, tight ends, people who catch the ball, I mean, there's a reason that why his nickname was the GOAT, right? Of all receivers, is because he was at his best in the playoffs. And yet, other than yards, he's going to end up losing receptions to Kelsey. He's probably, if Kelsey can stay healthy and come back for another year, which I think he will, he's going to lose touchdowns to Kelsey. And then Kelsey could very well catch him in Super Bowls, depending on how this year goes. And, if they get another one in the next, 2 or 3 years. And that's all, like I said, um, considering that Kelsey decides to come back, which I think he will for at least 2 more years. I think what I think the Chiefs will start doing is kind of what they did with Gronk with the Patriots is they won't use him near as prolifically. They'll try and look for other weapons to kind of, I hate to say limp him along, but not put as much of the load on him so that then when the playoffs come, then that's when he can turn it on. Do exactly like Gronk did, kind of, I guess, in a sense, load manage him in the NFL
Yeah, so I was
side
about to
until
say.
you get into the playoffs, and then you're going to see patented, nostalgic, old-fashioned Kelsey, I think, is what they'll do with
He's
him.
got about a bit of a good solid half in him, and then after that, it's just like he's getting older. Like you can just tell.
Yeah.
Like, but in the
It's just,
beginning, he's going to go crazy. Like
yeah.
he's going to go
And,
be really good. But
well,
that's kind of what Gronk did in his later
and
years.
exactly. I mean, and that's honestly all you really need from him is to jumpstart those first 3, 4 drives and
Yeah,
just be the dude in the first half. And then you let these guys that hopefully they will develop and continue to pick up the Rashee Rices, the Isaiah Pacheco's that can now complement the teams. So now Kelsey does not need to shoulder the entire burden on himself anymore because now those guys can start picking up the slack once he kind of gets the whole team going and starts making the defense change their game plan or respect it again because he just turns back into that monster of you better double team me or I'm going to break
yeah,
you across the middle of the field because your linebackers are not good enough to cover me and your safeties are not strong enough to cover me. So it's
yeah.
just it's crazy. I mean, he cooks corners and safeties. Even I know I'm saying that the linebackers can't
It's
stay with
so
him.
crazy.
Let's be honest, Savon. I mean, I'm sorry, Wellington. Savon will be on a little bit.
He'll be on a little bit.
I'm getting hyped for like Savon to come on. I have so much with the 49ers and the
Can't
Chiefs and
wait. I
everything.
can't wait.
It's
Cannot
so
wait.
good. Poor Savon, he doesn't know all the lead that's about to come his way. Anyways, it's just one of those things where, be honest, you watch him and it's like, can anybody cover this guy when he's like at his best? It's like he's a tight end and nobody can stay with him, man. He's just crazy the way he
That's the
goes.
it's like such a mismatch, and honestly, like
It's
that third down when he like it was like that back shoulder. I think it was a back shoulder throw, and he like turns around at the last minute. Like I was
mm-hmm.
their symmetry and chemistry. Even though I loved seeing Brady and Gronk do what they did for years, I'm like these guys are just on a
Gronk
different
was
level.
just a monster. It wasn't
Yeah,
the
physical
same.
specimen.
I
Yeah,
hate saying that because I'm not trying to diss Brady and Gronk because it was a fantastic combination. But like to your point, Mahomes and Kelsey are on like uh, they're on like a symbiotic connection to where like they know exactly what the other guy's gonna do because like Kelsey is like the king of stopping in the middle if it's zone coverage. He literally will park himself right in the middle of zone coverage. He'll break off his route and he'll just park himself in the soft spot where there's no coverage because he knows Mahomes is going to find him and look for him. And then Mahomes just knows where to put it right where Kelsey only Kelsey is going to be able to make the play. So it's a fantastic dynamic duo that, as long as he's playing, obviously he is getting older. I think you're 100% right. That's why he started cooling down in the second half. And that's the other thing is give the Ravens defense credit because the Chiefs were on a tear.
Hmm.
And by all metrics, if the Chiefs had kept up on that pace, this would have been a true blowout, a true
Oh yeah,
blowout, and not just a blowout by the way it felt. Because I do think it was a blowout in the way it felt, even though, like we both mentioned, the final score does not reflect blowout. But I think if they'd stayed on that pace, and there were several times where like that could have been it, but the Ravens sacked Mahomes 3 times. It's one of the only games in this postseason, the past 6 postseason games that Mahomes has been in that he's had a multi-sack game. The other one was with the high ankle sprain where he's basically running around on a busted foot, and he got sacked
yeah.
twice by the Bengals in the last year's AFC Championship game. And then they got sacked 3 times this year. And I'll just give the Ravens credit because their D-line, their defense as a whole is just crazy. So give the Ravens defense credit. And that's why I just think that a lot of this blame has to lay on Harbaugh and Lamar because like the defense stepped up when it needed to. And started slowing down the Chiefs, and the Ravens just could never get anything offensively going. And when they did, they had mistakes, either penalties or I guess the penalties. That's the one thing that you could criticize the defense is the defense just did not play mature at times, and in certain ways. And I don't want to sound super homer here. It felt like they knew that the game was slipping, and so they tried to go like bush league to try and get in the Chiefs' head a
Yeah.
couple times. I'm thinking of like the clothesline when Mahomes is trying to scramble out of the pocket and he just flips his arm out and he knows he's just going to clothesline. I mean, I'm not trying
Yeah.
to say it's one of those things where you don't really see that often, so it looks like kind of dirty, but maybe the intent's not there. I don't know. It just was one of those things where you could sense. I guess what I'm trying to say is desperation from the defense in
Oh yeah.
terms
They got out
of
of character.
trying to
They
make
got out of
stuff
character.
happen.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They,
and
they
I think they were just trying to do anything and everything that they could do to throw off the Chiefs game because they just realized as a collective team Mahomes he's starting to get into that patented groove, and if we don't like slow him down, and I think that's what ended up hurting him because you saw a couple with those penalties, and this is where maybe we can transition to the penalties. Is um, you can say there's so much now where it's like the Chiefs get all the calls and whatever, and I understand that there's missed stuff. It's the NFL, guys. Like the referees are going to
yeah.
miss stuff both ways. I think honestly, like if you look the way this was called, I think it was a pretty fairly even game. Honestly,
Yeah,
I
it
know that there
wasn't
was
a
those
bias. It wasn't a bias. Oh, like let's get the Chiefs. Let's get the Chiefs the Super Bowl so
everyone.
Taylor
Yeah,
Swift can be there. Like people were doing it. I was
exactly.
like, guys,
I'm glad you
hold
brought it
up.
up first.
I'm sorry. I just had to bring it up because people were like, hey, there is this conspiracy theory going around. Everybody wants Taylor Swift there. Was there? Oh, they want her to be there. They want to see her on the sidelines. Which I'm not saying the NFL doesn't like the fact that she's there. That's a reasonable assumption. But that doesn't mean the refs are going to give the Chiefs every call. That's just not the way the game is played. And if
That
you watch
well,
football long enough, you'll know that.
and the reason that I counter that is because the penalties that were called on the Ravens were not obscene. If you can be a non-biased fan, every penalty, all of the unsportsmanlike conduct that the Ravens committed, if it was your team, you would accept that's an unsportsmanlike.
Yeah.
Going in, sure, there's trash talk going on, but it's always the second dude who gets hit. And plus, talk does not get penalized like actions do. You and I both know that, and anyone who's watching that football. Everyone accusing Kelsey of trying to say things to like rile them up. Okay, if they're true, then fine. Saying stuff doesn't get you penalized. Walking up, being the second dude to an issue, and headbutting another player is what gets you penalized, not chit chat. Flexing over a player after you just pushed him to the ground and then standing over him, spin the ball and flexing on top of him. That's taunting. That's an
While
obvious
you're down by
call.
10, while you're down
While
by
you're
10, no,
exactly, I wasn't even going to mention the while you're down by 10, trying to make a comeback, but just the fact that anyone who thinks, oh, the NFL, why don't they allow them to taunt? I saw Joe Burrow let the guys taunt. It's like,
Okay,
if
Joe. Okay,
okay,
Joe.
Joe,
All
let
right. That
tell me
cheat
you're
sheet.
salty without telling me you're salty, man. Tell me you
Interesting
don't want
tweet.
the Chiefs to go.
Interesting tweet coming from him.
It's like, congratulations, you're now rooting for your division rival because of how much you don't want
That's
to be
hilarious.
displaced by the other guy. So it's just stuff like that. It's like, okay, if maybe you think I've always been the opinion, I don't think you should taunt in sports just because I'm kind of a stickler for the sportsmanlike. Like I
Yeah.
want it to be competitive. I'm okay with it being chippy, but I still want there to be an element of sportsmanship, and I don't think you need to be directly taunting in someone's face. If you wanna celebrate, then I'm totally fine with that. But don't shove someone to the ground and then just flex right over them. That's just, to me, doesn't have a place in sports in terms of the sportsmanship. That's just how I feel.
Yeah.
And even if you feel differently, regardless, it's the rule on the books. Okay, so Zay Flowers knew
Gotta
that.
follow
He
the
just still
rules.
decided to behave that way. So that's boneheaded mistakes. So that's the other thing that why I think that's what I'll just end on is that it ultimately came down to, in a lot of ways, championship veteran playoff experience meets unproven, desperate to prove themselves a team, basically. A great team. I will give the Ravens their props. They were an amazing team this year. They just, when it comes to the playoffs, they have not proven that they have the maturity and the experience to be able to get over the hump at this point. And I hate saying this, but it's one of those things where it's not as bad as the Cowboys and with Dak at this point because Dak just has that thing, but it's like, is Lamar starting to kind of get in that category? It's like
I don't
until
want to.
you win it
Yeah,
and
until
get to
you
the
win
Super
it.
Bowl, man, I can't believe in you, dude. Like it's I can believe in Joe, and I'm
I
not
can
trying to
believe
get
in
all of
Josh
the
Allen at
people.
times. I can
I
believe in
was
Josh
gonna say
Allen at
Josh
times.
Allen next.
Honestly,
It's like
he impressed me more. He impressed me more.
I'm not trying to get all of my rivals as a Chiefs fan angry at me, but it's like if you're honest at this point, and if you're anyone other than a fan of those teams, other than Joe and Pat, are you really going to believe or take any of them seriously in the playoffs until they actually show you at this point? Because right now, the Chiefs own the Bills. Like, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to rub that in, Bills fans, but it's like at this point, your team is living in a paranoid nightmare where Patrick Mahomes is the boogeyman that you can't get out of your head. And then Lamar is just one of those things where I'm sorry, as much as I enjoy watching Lamar, Lamar is kind of Dak-esque in terms of he can't get it done in the playoffs for whatever reason in the big game. He's now what, Wellington, 1-4, 1-5 in
One and
playoff
four,
games.
1-4 in playoff
It's
games.
so it's just
I'm
like you've
sorry, like
got a horrible record in the playoffs, and the one game you won was against the woeful Titans. After, I mean, I know they knocked out Brady that year, but it was the Titans. Like I'm with led by Tannehill, and I know Tannehill was there, and that Tannehill reached the AFC title game. But like at the same time, it's like that's your best win was the Titans.
and
Come
I've
on,
said it
man.
so
I
many
mean,
times.
it's
I've said
just
it so many times. Like Mahomes is not afraid of any of these guys, but if there's one guy
no.
he looks across over the sideline, he's like, he can beat me. It's Joe Burrow.
Yeah,
It's Joe
and
Burrow.
I'll
You know
give
what I
him.
mean?
I will give Bengals fans that he legit. It's the one dude where,
Yeah.
and even I'm still not putting Joe in Pat's category.
Oh
Like I'm
no, I'm
sorry,
not. I'm not
but
either. I'm
if we're
just saying
talking,
like
and I'm
with
not saying
respect
that
to
you were trying to, but
yeah,
I just wanted to make sure that we're straight and we were both on the
yeah.
same page. It's like Pat is head and
He's
shoulders above
here.
everyone. Like
Yeah, he's
it's
here.
like S tier and everyone else is in A tier. Like and Joe may be at the top
He's
of
trying to
the
catch Brady.
A
He's
plus
trying to catch
plus
Brady at this
tier.
point.
Yeah. Exactly, and I mean, it's like at this point he is.
Yeah.
And I know people will have their disagreements, but if we're talking about like the beginning of their career, like Pat is got a better start to his
An
career than Brady
insane
did.
start.
It's dude.
Four
He's
Super
been to
Bowls, four Super Bowl appearances.
five of the last. Excuse me. He's been to 4 of the last 5 Super Bowls, and he has not failed to make the AFC Championship game in all 6 years that he has started. That's nutso. That I don't. It's
Literally,
like it is
listeners,
crazy
there's only one
GOAT
performance.
Hall of Fame thing like you're doing
Yeah.
at that point. And I'm not trying to say that he's there with Brady yet. He's still got to work his way up in Super Bowls, but like we're going to get into and this is what makes it interesting in terms of the NFL. We're going to get into the Jordan versus LeBron debate because Pat is going to have all of the stats, all of the accomplishments over Brady, and Brady's going to have that 7 rings that Pat may or may not be able to reach. And so it'll be interesting to me. Let's just say that Pat ends his career and he's on top of Brady in every statistical category, playoff wins, but the one thing that Brady's got is 7 rings and Pat finishes with like 4 or 5, and that's 2 less than Brady. That's what will be the interesting conversation at that point is will we evolve enough or will it be a very similar Jordan DeBron debate? It just depends on where your head is. Do you like complete game or do you value just the championship and the chips at the end of the day? And
And
that's what
also
elevates the
this,
GOAT.
people will say, "Hey, he beat Mahomes in the Super Bowl." So people are going to
Yeah,
also put
that's
that.
true.
And
Yeah.
that's the other part. That's the other part. So,
Yeah, that's true.
I think in terms of just a start to his career, like
It's
6,
unmatched.
it's
It's
unmatched. And
unmatched.
the only thing is this: there's only one I think bad playoff performance he's had is
The
that second half.
Bengals.
That second half
It's
against
the
the Bengals.
second half against the
That's
Bengals. It's the
it.
one that haunts him to this day
That's
still.
it. And that's the one.
Because they should have had
The one they should have won.
that game because the Bucks game, as bad as it was, they if you
The
look at that
offensive
game,
line
and
was horrible.
I will forever bang on the desk. Basically, they were down to second and third string offensive linemen, and I know that you have to play with who you are, but if you look against the Bucks team that they had on defense, especially that front 7,
Yeah.
second and third stringers were not going to be able to hold up against that Bucks front seven that game. So it's like, I understand you still have to play the game, but that's not as bad of a loss to me when Mahomes is running for his life, running 300 some odd yards in total aggregate because of how much he's having to run for his life, dotting people up, parallel with the ground, hits Tyreek Hill in the face mask, and he drops the ball. It reminded me very much of the Peyton Manning versus the Seahawks Super Bowl, where it looked like Peyton Manning was the only one who wanted to be there in that Super Bowl. So I'm not going to lay that one on Mahomes. Yes, it was among the fewest points that he scored in a playoff game with 9, but I'm not going to chalk that up to Mahomes' fault because he was down significantly with offensive linemen, which means you're not going to be able to run for your life all game like that. So yes, bad game, but it's not as bad as choking away a 20-something odd lead. What was it, Wellington? 28-7 at the halftime? Was that what it
Yeah.
was with the
Yeah, I think
Bengals?
so.
It was something like 3 scores against the Bengals, and they
21
just
this game.
melted down in the second half. And then they went to overtime, and it throws the game-sealing pick.
And do you
And
remember
the
the
interesting
play?
thing,
You remember the play right before? I remember this like yesterday. The play right before halftime, and
short of the goal line,
short of the goal line, and Reed, he wants to go for the field goal. Mahomes like, no, let's go for it. Let's go. And he's like, all
yeah,
right, I'll let you do it. You're Mahomes.
yeah. That's I guarantee you Pat wishes he could change that
We
so
wish
that
you could
they could
change
keep
that.
momentum, just kick the field goal, keep momentum. No, but the other thing that was interesting is that Wellington, that was the last pick that he's thrown in the playoffs, was in that Bengals second half to Tyreek when it bounced off. It was double covered and it was 40 yards down the field, but it hits Tyreek in the hands, bounces off, gets picked off in overtime, and the Bengals end up winning by the field goal to go into the Super Bowl. And that's the last pick that Mahomes has thrown because I think Mahomes has started to change his style. He's realized I got to do it Brady's way.
His
It's
game
great
is
to be
like much more mature
flashy.
now. Yeah, it's much more mature.
Exactly. It's like everyone wants to say, and I realize the offense, if the offense looks this way next year, then we can talk about concerning. But I think this year was very much a growing pains thing in terms of letting Rashee Rice mature, standing pat, holding the line until you got to the playoffs, and then we will be who we were meant to be, who we are at the end of the day. And I think that's what you saw with them, and that's what I think you're going to see with them. And I think they're just trying to play a more mature, and they decided to
Yeah,
play to their strength. The defense was just stronger this year, and I'm not afraid to admit that as a Chiefs fan. But Mahomes is still that guy. He's still going to get the job done, and the defense is complementary. It's the best defense that Mahomes has had his whole career, and they're not afraid to rely on it. And that's a great thing, in my opinion, because Brady did it all the time. Brady had more top 5 defenses in terms of scoring allowed the majority of his career. And that's how they proved to win games, is because I'm going to be fantastic, GOAT level, Hall of Fame at the quarterback position. I'm going to do what I need to win the game, which is, in some cases, throwing the ball away, sacrificing my own personal statistics, and I'm going to do what I need to actually win the game. And I'm not going to try and put on the Superman cape anymore and try and go out there and just carry the team. That's not who I'm going to play anymore. And I think that's what you have seen with Mahomes since that loss with to the Bengals 2 years ago. I think if you look at last year's playoff run, yes, the offense looked better, but Mahomes was playing more steady. And for sure this year, Mahomes has just been taking what the defense has been giving him. He's not been getting greedy, and he's not putting the ball in jeopardy, which is exactly what Brady did when it came to playoff time. And you can argue Mahomes is doing that better this past 2 years than Brady because of not throwing a pick.
yeah,
And like I said, he hasn't also taken sacks, and he's taken only 5 in the last 6 games. And like I said, 2 of those were on the high ankle sprain, I think, against the Bengals last year in the championship game, and then 3 were this championship game because of how good the Ravens front 7 were. All the other 4 games that they played in, no sacks, 0 sacks in the Super Bowl against the Eagles, 0 sacks against the Bills last week, 0 sacks against the Dolphins, and then 0 sacks against I think it was the Bills when they played the Bills to get to the Bengals
AFC,
last
yeah,
year.
yeah,
So 0 sacks in all 4 of those games. So he's doing what he needs to do, getting the ball out quick, throwing the ball away when it's not there, dirting the ball when he needs to, avoiding sacks, and then also what's super underrated about his game, scrambling then when he needs to. Like I will forever be amazed at how underrated his scrambling is. Like I understand Lamar
Oh,
is more
it's
dynamic, Josh is a freak of nature when he takes off, but like just watch Mahomes playoff games when he takes off. When Mahomes take off, he just breaks your soul as the defense because he knows exactly when and where he needs to scramble, and he will just absolutely crush you. It's like 3rd and 9, and you think you have everything covered and bottled up. Kelsey's finally locked up, and then choop, there goes Mahomes up the sideline and picks up the first down. And it's just like,
Killer
it's got to
first
be.
down.
Like I said, it's not flashy like Lamar and Josh are when they take off, but it's needed. It's backbreaking when he takes off, and that's just such an underrated part of his game. So
It's not like
he's just
it's not like he's catching his own deflected pass like Lamar did, which was a
yeah,
crazy play.
exactly. No, that's not his game. Yeah, that was nuts. I was having shades of the Tennessee game when we were with
Yeah.
Alex Smith in the Tennessee game. Mariota doinks it off the dude's hands and
Oh
then
my
catches it and then dies.
goodness.
That was one of the most painful games as a Chiefs fan.
I was literally
Fortunately, we're in
I
the
was literally
Mahomes
in a
era, so I
rest.
don't have to
Yeah.
reflect about those anymore. Those days are long gone. I waved
Those are some
goodbye in the
scary
rearview
days.
mirror a long time, Savant, Wellington. I
Yeah.
did it again. I'm
No,
terrible with names
it's
today,
okay.
Wellington.
It's okay. But I
I'm
just want
still
to say
so
this.
pumped. Where's Savon, man? Come on, get here,
Where is he,
Savon.
Savon?
At
You
this
got the
point, you
invite
are
already.
dodging the smoke. Get
I just want to say
here.
this. I just want to say this, listeners. Micaiah said this was a growing pains year for the Chiefs. Think about what a regular growing pains year for a team is. Get to the wild card. Get to the
You're
division.
lucky if you make the
This
playoffs.
is they're in the Super Bowl, and this was a growing pains year for them. That's scary. That is scary for me to see.
This Wellington, it's not just growing pains. This is, everyone admits, the
The
worst
worst team
year
that they've
of
had
the
in Mahomes'
Mahomes
era.
era, and they are going to the Super Bowl
What
again. It's like,
what's your pick for like your favorite like Chiefs team in the Mahomes era? Like if there's one team you're saying, okay, like that's the team I think that's gonna
oh man,
I know there's so many. I know
that's.
there's
I love last year's just because we shut up all the haters. It was like, oh, you traded Tyreek Hill.
yeah.
What are you going to be without him? Go and win the Super Bowl without him in the first year that you traded, and do it with all the pieces that you used to trade him away, basically, and ended up building up a team. And so all the pieces that you ended up getting I shouldn't say traded. You traded Tyreek and got all those draft picks and capital back, and you went out and you drafted an Isaiah Pacheco. Now I know that was 7th round, so you didn't get him, but you got McDuffie, who ended up being a fantastic player this year and last year as a rookie alongside Snead. And just other players that you get, a Karlaftis, who I can't remember if that was this year or last year. I think, was that this year? No, because last year was Karlaftis' year. Ended up being a good complementary DN. He's shaping up into being a really good DN. So it's just one of those things where it's that one's great, but man, I gotta go with the year I think we beat the Bills, because like that's the most memorable to me. So I think that was the first Super Bowl with the 49ers. I think it was that year because we beat the Bills in that overtime thriller. I remember where I was, Wellington. I was in Campus House at PCC. That was our former college that Wellington and I both attended.
Yeah.
And so I was in my master's program. I was in 2020. Was it 2020 or was it 2021?
2020. It was 2020.
2020. So I guess I was it? Wait, was I? Maybe I wasn't my master's year. I can't. So maybe the Bills thriller was not.
Oh,
Maybe the Bills.
you're meaning the 13th second.
Yeah, that. Which year was that?
That was 2021. That was 2021.
So the Chiefs didn't win that one. That was the one to go to Tampa, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so never mind. It's not that year. As thrilling as it was to beat the Bills that year, because that's one of the most memorable games, I will tell you. But in terms of the teams by itself, the 20 was the year that it was the Titans, wasn't it? That was the year it was the Titans made their run and then got smoked by us in the
These years, hey, listeners, these years are colliding. They have such a great run. We're forgetting the year.
I mean, I'm a Chiefs fan, y'all, and I can't keep it all straight. All the amazing moments, it's just a blur. Man, I think I do got to go last year. As awesome as it was, I mean, it was electric to win.
That almost felt like, to me personally, if I'm doing a comp, it felt like the 2022 year that the Warriors won the title, because it was like, we won one without KD. You guys can't say anything else. Steph finally got that.
And Steph finally got one on his own.
Yeah.
No KD. The monkey. It was not the 2016 Warriors where everybody was young. It was definitely Steph centric. Yes, Clay was there, but it's not the Clay of old. It's not the Draymond of old, and he's got all these young guys that he's carrying. So it was the first one where Steph like put on the Superman cape and won it by himself. And so I think that's what last year kind of felt like, because you finally saw, no Hill. What are they going to look like without Hill? Well, Mahomes is the solution. It was never Hill. Hill was just a super nice piece to have in terms of just burning the top off of your defense. But I think the reason why I really like last year is because it was also a step towards Mahomes maturing because Mahomes wasn't going to be suckered into, oh, where's Tyreek? Looks like it's time to bail out play and go Superman, because you couldn't do that anymore because there's no Tyreek to just chuck up the ball and Tyreek have his magic. Because don't get me wrong, Tyreek was magical. I'm making it sound like he was just another role
He was
player, and I don't mean to make it
crazy.
sound like that because he's electric. He's easily top 3 receiver in the league, top 1. I mean, when he's at his best. So don't get me wrong. He's an amazing piece, but it was just wonderful and awesome as a Chiefs fan to see. It was Mahomes, and
Yeah,
Mahomes decided to take the step forward in terms of I am now going to take what the defense gives me. I don't need to just chuck up the ball and let my amazing electric speed wide receiver make a
yeah,
play. I don't need to chuck it up to Kelsey and let him make a. I'm just going to take what's there, and I'm going to be consistent, and I'm going to be methodical, and that's what wins you games, is playing smart football rather than heroic football. As amazing as Mahomes' heroic moments can look, it was just great, just because we kind of got that monkey off our back last year in terms of you don't need Tyreek Hill. You need Mahomes and you need Reed, and that's enough. That's enough to win the Super Bowl, is when they're at their best. Then no one else is coming close. And I think that's just what was just so great about last year, when everybody was just counting them out and it looked like it was going to be everyone else, and they took care of business like they have consistently. So it's either the and the reason I would say the 49ers, the first Super Bowl is close, is because it was the first one that we'd gotten
yes.
since
That was
Super
awesome.
Bowl 4. So it's like, it's just so glorious getting that first one in Mahomes' second full year as a starter after the heartbreaking loss to New England in Arrowhead the year before in overtime. I mean, literally the same thing that happened to Josh Allen happened to Patrick Mahomes, and people forget
That
about
first
that.
year, that year they lost to the Patriots, I was like, that
That would
team's
have been
gonna
the
be
best year
around.
if they'd won the Super Bowl. If they'd won the
Yes,
Super Bowl, then I would say unequivocally that team, because
yes.
that team was world beaters, and then Brady just did Brady things. Because I think they would have absolutely smoked the Rams that year. Ironically, my roommate is a great Saints fan, and that was the Rams no call offensive pass
Oh
interference
yeah.
year. And so we should have had we always joke, we should have had a Chiefs Saints Super Bowl. And that, I think, would have been electric. Breeze versus Mahomes.
Oh my goodness.
But yeah, that would have been insane. But it didn't happen. Brady pulled his magic in overtime. But I would say that one would probably have been the best year. But we didn't get to the Super Bowl. So I've got to say either the 49ers year or last year. And I'd edge out last year just a little bit, just because we got to see what Mahomes looks like when it's him running the show, and I'm not trying to. Also, then, folks, don't take away that I'm trying to downplay Kelsey. Okay, Kelsey was
Oh,
still
Kelsey
amazing
is so
last year
important.
too,
Yeah.
but there was no 1-2, because the argument with Kelsey and Tyreek was always, oh, you got to pick your poison, and if you pick both of them to double team, that means someone's wide open. If you decide to double team them, so you can't double team them. You had to pick your poison. You could double Kelsey and then bracket Tyreek, but just both of them are so good at finding the gaps that would even be the death of you eventually over time. So I just enjoyed last year just because we destroyed the Tyreek narrative of Mahomes needed a world beating wide receiver to to win, and that's what will be great about this year, is in a year where unequivocally he's had the worst receiving core, everyone would say, as good as Rashee Rice has developed, and he looks like Rashee's going to be a solid number one.
Look, and
But it's
trusting
one of those
Marquez
things.
Valdez Scamp, and we can't forget trusting
We can't
Marquez.
say it now.
I
I
was
know, right?
like,
He caught
oh
that deep
my
bottom.
goodness.
Like,
Buffalo and then Baltimore. I was like, no way, no way, MBS. I was like, that's where Mahomes is so different. He was like, he said it all throughout the year. Hey, we're gonna figure it out. We're gonna figure it out.
yep.
I'm gonna trust those guys, and he
This is
trusted
where
them.
he's like Brady, and maybe even a little bit better than Brady, is that he would not blackball people. He does not blackball people just because they have had a rough streak. He might go away from them for a little bit to where they can figure out some things in between the week, because he doesn't want to put the game at risk by trying to force them when they're having a slump time. But he will not like just quit going to them, because the Buffalo game, exactly like you said, he had the incredible one-handed fade to the sideline that he caught that was super clutch, and then he caught the game sealing catch at the end of the Ravens game. So it's one of those things where it's like, even the supposed weak link of the Chiefs ended up coming through and paying off in the end. What are you
Yeah.
going to do? It's
What are
just
you
like
gonna do?
it must suck to hate the Chiefs, because it's just one of those things where it's like everything's sunshine and rainbows for the Chiefs in the end. So
They
it's
have the
just like,
Midas
it's
touch right now.
crazy.
They have the Midas touch now. And
It,
39. I'm so we're gonna move on to the Lions for it, because 39 minutes we were just gonna talk about the Chiefs.
you had to. You knew who you were inviting on,
Come on, like
Wellington.
when we have a Chiefs fan, we have to talk, because hey, like they're the dynasty, right? They're on the verge of being a dynasty right now. So we got to talk
On the
about them.
verge? You think on the verge?
Well, when we
Come
talk
on,
about
man. They're a dynasty already. I mean, they're locked in
I
because
think
of this
so.
year.
I think so, but people will say, "Oh, you got to win at least three to be a." I already think they're a
No.
dynasty. I
They've
think
been in.
people like, you know what I mean?
Now
Because some
you're
people will
just
say,
now
"Hey,
you're just
you're
trying
not."
to raise the bar above to now Super Bowl wins, and it's like they've been to 6 out of 6 AFC championships. How is that not a dynasty? And 4 of the last 5 Super Bowls. Yeah, they haven't won them all, but it's like you're not going to win them every year. So like, what do
Yeah,
you want from a dynasty? To me, I get what you're saying and what people expect. To me, I just don't buy into that because you've been every year that Mahomes has
I
been
don't
here.
get
Like
it.
I said, I don't want to keep hitting it again, but you've been in the AFC Championship, which is the one game away from the biggest game
Yeah.
every year that your quarterback has been there. You've been in 4 of the last 5 Super Bowls, and you should have been in 5 of the 5 had it not been for the meltdown against the Bengals. But Sarah, they weren't. And so it's just one of those things. And then yeah, they didn't win all of them, but they've won now 2, possibly 3. And so it's like, how is that not a dynasty? Especially if they win it this year. There's no arguing
Oh,
for
if they
sure if
win
they
it
win
this
it this
year, you
year.
can't
I think
argue.
there's already no arguing it just because of the 6 AFC championships and the 4 out of 5 Super Bowls to me.
I just want to
That's
say
a
this: a
dynasty.
person I watch every week, Michael Wilbon, off pardon interruption. He goes at the Chiefs every week. He says they're just a dynasty. He used to call them a dynasty of one. They're just a dynasty of one. I'm not going to be impressed until they win multiple. Michael Wilbon, after they beat which I think they will beat the 49ers, you have to refer to them as a dynasty. We can't do the more dynasty of
It's
one.
over if they
Just
beat
come
the
on.
49ers this year. It's a dynasty. The reason I hate that standard though, Wellington, is because yeah, the Patriots won 3, and then they went that huge stretch where they didn't win one until
And even
did we stop calling them a dynasty after those first 3? No, nobody stopped calling. They had their best year statistically in that gap. Nobody stopped calling them a dynasty after that. So it's like,
yeah,
miss me with that. Like, I understand they won 3 and the Chiefs have only won 2, but at the same time, like the Patriots hadn't gone to 6 straight AFC championships under Brady with that stretch. Uh, yeah, just miss me with that. I'm over with that, man. They're a dynasty. I'm sorry
absolutely,
if you don't. You're just a Chiefs hater if you don't want to admit that they're already a dynasty. To me, I
definitely.
get the 3 minimum, but when you've been to 4 out of 5,
You get a seat
and
at the
you've won
dynasty
2 of
table.
those.
You get a seat at the dynasty table. They're already
Yeah.
they're already sitting there. And now moving on to the NFC Championship, the Lions blown lead and 49ers
Exhale,
cover.
everybody. Exhale with
Yeah,
us.
X with us. We know
We
that.
won't be as intense with this one. Well, maybe we some of us. I mean, once
Yeah.
Savon gets here,
Once
then we will
Savon
be
comes,
because
clock is
Savon
ticking.
said
Clock is
some not
ticking.
so nice things about the winner of this game,
Yeah, that's
and he's
the
been
technical
bullying them all
difficulties.
year. And yet, the 2 teams that he's trashed all year end up here we are, Super Bowl, and the 2 teams
Yep.
that he's dumped
And
on
and remember and
consistently.
remember and I want to go back to this because I think you remember this. He mentioned the Eagles and he said they're
Oh
going
yeah, I was there for
16-1.
that.
They're going 16-1, and I was like, Savon, they're not going 16-1. He's like, you're
He was
crazy.
convinced
I was
they were
like,
not going to lose another one of those games. Anyways, poor guy. I honestly, there was a part of me that felt bad because he was so confident, and then they just rattled
like
off like what was it,
fell
3
off the
straight
train
losses.
tracks. They
It was
fell off
like
the
3
train
straight
tracks.
losses. They lost to the 49ers, they lost to the Cowboys, and then they lost to the Giants. It's like,
Oh my
man,
god!
he missed hard
They
with
even
that
lost to the
one.
Cardinals at one point. Even lost to the
Yeah, it was
Cardinals
the
at one
Cardinals. It
point. Oh
wasn't the
my
Giants. It was
goodness!
the
Yeah.
Cardinals. Yeah. It's
Um,
just that was a classic. I don't know if you remember the Pittsburgh Steelers a few years ago when they were like 11 and 0,
that's what
and
I keep
everyone.
saying.
It's
They were
the
so
Eagles this
overrated.
year were the Steelers of however many years ago that was. It was like they were 11 and 0, but for some reason with the Steelers that year, everyone realized this team ain't for real. Like, I'm sorry, I know they're 11 0, but this team ain't for real. But we didn't want to say that about the
Over
Eagles
the last
because they
5.
had just gone to the Super Bowl last year. So Savon was right in terms of you got to trust them to figure out. But I just think that is one of those things that after they lost the 49ers and then the Cowboys, you started to see warning signs. And then for sure, when they lost against the Cardinals, the alarm bell should have been going off when that happened. It's like this team is not together anymore. There's something wrong. And that if they don't figure it out really quickly, then it's bad juju. And then that's what happened against the Buccaneers is the Buccaneers like absolutely curb stomped them in that game. And it just looked like the Eagles didn't even want to be there that game. So it was just
This is
as
why
a
Micaiah is so smart. This is why Micaiah. I don't know that many people have mentioned the 2020 Steelers. I mentioned it once on Twitter, and I was like, "Hey, does anybody else remember the 2020 Steelers?" Because
Well, that's
they
because that was the year that the Chiefs were with Mahomes, and that's the year that they won the Super Bowl. And
all the
everyone was like,
attention was
"Oh,
on
it's going
them.
to be another Steelers Chiefs," and the
Yeah,
Steelers they look like these world beaters. And then what they do, they just nosedive those last 5 games. I think they lost. I think they lost or 6 games at that time because we hadn't gotten the 17. I think they went 1-5 in those last games. They were like 11-0, and then they went 1-5 in the last games.
yeah,
So yeah,
um,
no, I remember Wellington.
yeah. And now getting to the NFC
I got
Championship.
you.
San Francisco won 34-31 after a 17-point rally. Christian McCaffrey had 2 TD runs. Backup Elijah Mitchell scored on a 3-yard run. And man, like after the first, I don't know how you felt after the first half. I was like, looks like the Lions got it. Looks like the Lions got it. It wasn't saying that it
Oh
was
yeah.
completely over. You can't count out that 49ers offense. But this is where risking and going for it and being bold. I'm not saying that it's not always bad, the analytics, but there's sometimes you can try to outsmart yourself. And I think Dan Campbell, there are a lot of times, hey, just go for the points. And he just kind of just try to push the agenda, push the narrative. And obviously the Lions, which there were just so many fluky plays at some
That
point.
game was
It
nuts in terms
was
of
a
fluky
nut. It was a nut
plays. It was
game.
nutty.
But I want to, and I know Savon will hate this. Brock Purdy made some impressive plays in the second half. He did.
You see,
I,
you see my boy scrambling. You see my boy
he
scrambling.
made some game-changing plays. I know Cam Newton wants to call him a game manager and put him
There we
down.
go with that.
Whatever,
Oh
whatever,
my!
Cam. We'll get to that later. Trust me, we will address that. But what did you think about this
Tell
comeback
me
for
you're
San
salty without telling me you're salty, man.
Exactly. All these salty people,
This
man.
dude, after he got his money, was 30-36, and this dude wants
Now
to
he's
say he's a
talking.
game manager.
All
This
right.
dude wouldn't dive on a football in the Super Bowl, and you have the
We
audacity
remember
to
that
call
Super Bowl.
Brock
We
Purdy.
remember that Super Bowl, Cam. We remember that Super Bowl. We have
It's
not
like,
forgotten.
dude, miss me with that. Like you can't be. I understand. And here's the thing. And I don't want to get sidetracked from the main issue, but we'll just stop on Cam real quick. I get what he's saying because if you look at it at face value, he's right. Brock Purdy's in terms of talent wise, he is the 10th or worst player on his team. Like
Yeah.
if we named the players on the 49ers, Brock Purdy would not be mentioned until double digits. I think we can all agree with that. But it's the sentiment in terms of the quarterback is the most valuable position in football, especially in the NFL. And Brock Purdy is the 49ers quarterback. And I understand that people like Savon want to say yak 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 with the I watched that episode. Okay, see, I watch you guys. You all got to be watching. Yeah, I was there when Savon was just
Oh,
yak
I'm so
yak
glad
yak
you said
yak.
that. I'm so glad you said. I was like, hey, Savon, come on, man, come on.
Who's getting them the ball? It's like it's still at the end of the day. Yes, they're great at yards after catch, but you still got to get them the ball, and it's not always easy to do that with
by
the
the way,
placement. I
by the way,
think you
Micaiah.
saw.
By the way, Micaiah. He's almost here. Savon's almost here.
Okay, okay,
Almost.
we're almost to the exciting
Almost
time, folks. As exciting as the Chiefs discussion between Wellington and I was, you have no idea how exciting this
You have
podcast
no
is about to
idea. You have
get.
no
You have
idea.
no idea how long Wellington and I have been texting
No,
and
for me,
talking
no.
about this
Hey,
return.
we've been waiting for this. We've been waiting for this episode.
This is why I feel bad because Savon doesn't even know that he's about to get jumped, and he is totally about to get jumped. And I feel so bad, but so good about it at the same time because he
You
was
guys were
so
messaging about
stubborn on
me. You
it.
guys were messaging about me.
It wasn't directly about you, Savon. It was more about when I was going to get to come back on so we could have the discussion. Okay, it was not actually targeted at you. But
but with
yeah,
this,
this
yeah, keep going, keep going.
the game was to get back on track, and regardless what Cam has to say, it's salty talk at that point, just because it's like he's the quarterback, he's who they need, he's good for them, and you can look at it. Shanahan has not made it to the Super Bowl with anyone other than Purdy and Garoppolo. So it's like you can say that Shanahan has the system for the quarterbacks. Beathard didn't make it happen. I'm trying to think that Lance did not pan out, and I'm trying to think of their other one random cornerback that they had that they tried to make work. I can't remember. But it's like you got to give him some credit at the same time because it's like the dude has not lost a playoff game that he's finished healthy. The only game he lost was that game against the Eagles last year where he basically tore the ligament in his elbow. So it's one of those things where, and they didn't have McCaffrey last year. So I understand like you added a phenomenal piece, but Their defense isn't as good as it was in the past, in my opinion. Now, the defense stepped up this game, but their defense isn't nearly what it was, especially the defensive line. Like, that's the crazy thing about the 49ers is, like, it used to be you could not run on the 49ers, and now you definitely can run on the 49ers. It's kind of like the Chiefs.
And
Their
I do
their
want to
strength is
say,
more linebackers and secondary.
I think that's something that the Chiefs are going to pay attention to with that
Oh,
49ers.
you better
Checo.
believe Isaiah Pacheco. Like, I'm telling you all, if you have not watched Chief games, the reason I'm hype as a Chiefs fan is not just because Mahomes is cooking and because the defense is amazing. It's because the new number 10 in town runs like he hates the ground that he walks on, and that dude is crazy. Like, it's got to be demoralizing, Wellington, when this dude rips off a 4-yard run and he just pops up and like just like sprints 5 more yards down and like you kind of like to psych himself out. It's like that dude, yeah, Pacheco's nuts. I can't wait to see how Reed implements the run game against the 49ers. But yeah, so I would say that the in saying that the 49ers have to do a lot more on offense to get what they need done. And so Purdy has really been instrumental. Now, did he have a good game against the Packers? Overall, no. What was cool about the Packers game is, did he make the game-winning drive? Yes.
Oh, he
So
did.
while he did not have a great game against the Packers, he did move the ball when he needed to most. So despite his limitations, he found a way to win. And then in this game, you got to see him basically break the Shanahan curse. And that was when Shanahan is down. I can't remember the exact stat, but when Shanahan was down by, I think, 20 or more points, right? Or like double digit. I can't remember what the crazy weird stat was, but it's like if he was down by more than a touchdown in the fourth quarter, then he was like 2-30 something. It's like something abysmal. I can't
And
remember what the
that's the
exact stat
thing. And that's the
was.
thing because people, even for me, like when they were trailing the Packers, I'm like, man, they don't do well when they're trailing.
They
Like
don't look,
Shanahan, he
yes,
loves to be in the lead,
ahead
run,
because
keep it going, keep the offense going, and then they can just, keep it humming.
Shanahan is very much a scripted person in terms of running what is on script and making that happen. And so I think that's why you see that a lot of times, which is why a lot of times with his quarterbacks, I think that's why you see them. But Purdy is one of the few that has seemed to be able to, at least in these past 2 games, to overcome that a little bit because he's been able to come from behind and end up winning when the game mattered. Now, to the lion side of it, because we got to address this too, because it both seemed that from a certain perspective you could see like the Ravens and the Lions both gave away these games from a certain perspective, even though I will always push back against that. The teams that win still deserve their credit, but definitely I'm not going to discount that the other teams could do things that could let them back in the game or cause them to win the game. The Lions in this case, for the Ravens, it was a failure to run the ball. For the Lions, it was their super aggro play calling with Dan Campbell, and I love him to death. I think he's an amazing head coach. I think he's exactly what that organization needs. But he just went super aggro on every fourth down, and it just bit him in the butt. Um, I kind of understand a few of them because if you look at their roster, the Lions do not have a good kicker. So the one where he went from like the 49ers, what was it, 36, and it would have been like a 50 something yard field goal. I understand that because you've got a kicker who you're not super comfortable with relying on for long kicks. So I get that one. But the one, Wellington, when they were up, I can't remember what they were up, and maybe this was the first quarter, and so it wasn't as impactful, but they went for it when it was like 4th and 3 in the red zone, a super makeable field goal to me, and they went for it and they didn't get it. And it's like, why are you going for it when you're up
Yeah.
multiple scores instead of kicking the 40 something? Again, I understand you're worried about your kicker, but if you can't rely on your kicker to kick it a 40 something yard, then you're truly hamstrung at that
Oh,
point. If you
yeah.
can't trust him to kick a 40-yarder. I understand 40-yarders no chip shot, but at the same time, like 40-yarders, that's about the average in the NFL. If you can't kick that, then you're truly in a world of pain. So I just didn't understand that one. They just the Lions this whole year, and they happened against the Cowboys game too, when they just seemingly went for it out of rage because of that controversial call. But they just, it's one of those things where they have lived by emotion, and it looked like this game, the emotion finally got them in the butt and it caused their downfall. Um, 49ers just came through when it mattered most. And the Lions kind of just, I'm sure Savon will say, the Lions pulled the Lions as, as a Packers fan, but, And it certainly looked like it in this one because just the Lions were on top, and then a few fluky things from Jared Goff. The fumble from was that Montgomery or Gibbs that fumbled that ball? I'd have to go back and look. That definitely let them back into the game because they were on
Yeah.
their own territory, and the 49ers got it at like the Lions 30-25. They were basically in the red zone when they recovered that fumble. They got some fortunate breaks. That random one that bounced off of the Lions helmet and right into Brandon Ayuk's hands. That got him there at the 4-yard line. But yeah, I mean, I just don't understand at this point how you don't give Purdy his flowers, because I understand he may not be the flashiest or the most talented player on the 49ers roster. But like you said, he made some great throws when he needed to. Sure, he got lucky with a few, but I mean, luck is a part of the game in the NFL. You get
Yeah.
lucky with some of them. Um, and the other underrated thing about this game was he looks like they might have found something with him being able to scramble. So I'd have to look at what he ended up scrambling for, but I'm pretty sure it was a sizable chunk. And so if they can use that and exploit it to their advantage, then I think that they're going to be sitting well. I'm still going to have the Chiefs just because at this point I don't understand how you doubt the Chiefs. He had 5 carries for 48 yards. So I mean,
Yeah.
not too bad. Not
Not
too
too
bad.
bad.
And there was just some great moments. There was that one where he was running to his left, and he opened himself up and threw to use check along the sidelines. That looked really great. So I mean, he just had some great moments. And then at the end of the day, they were down, and he maintained his composure. And you can say that the Lions made some mistakes that let him in the game, but you still have to capitalize off those mistakes. And that's coming from a Chiefs fan, where after the defense stripped Lamar and the fumble, the Chiefs did nothing with it. On the drive where they got the ball from the Ravens, on that fumble from Zay Flowers on the goal line, I think that they might have gotten a field goal out of it. So the Chiefs didn't make the most of their opportunities. Brock Purdy in this game, he did on the
He
ones that
did.
the mistakes that the Lions did. So I mean, you got to give him his flowers at this point. To me, he's in the Super Bowl. Um, I know they have a great team. I know they've got a lot of great players,
You still
but
got to
it doesn't
deliver the
matter.
passes to these great receivers. You
Well,
still have to
exactly, and that's
deliver
what
it.
I guess that's where I would push back against people, that just want to say that it's total yards after catch. It's like if you watch, especially this game, they were not all like wide open. He had to make some good throws to be able to get them, and then yes, that's the part of being a team is that they all know their role, and the 49ers have some great role players with Kittle, Debo, and CMC, and so they're going to be electric when they get the ball. And you look at the stats, and the reason why I think this is a perfect game of why Purdy is great for them. You look at the stats. CMC didn't have a phenomenal. He was short of 100 yards, so I mean, that's still. I guess that's still great. I shouldn't say I guess it is great. If you
It
get
is.
100 yards, it's still solid. But I hate saying that. That's dumb to say. Yeah, if you get 100 yards rushing,
Yeah.
that's a good game.
That's
But he didn't break 100 quite. None of the receivers had over 100, so it wasn't like any of them just went nuts. You look at all their stats, and Purdy distributed the ball. They all have like really good receiving stats between Ayuk, Debo, CMC, and even Jennings in that category. So and then Kittle on top of that. So he distributed the ball. He did what he needed to. Um, and I just think he proved his mettle. So I mean, you can't hate on the guy anymore. To me, yeah, he's done what he's needed to do, and you can say he's got a plethora, a gluttony of riches. But at the end of the day, you have to do something with those. And they were down, and other quarterbacks in Shanahan's system have been down, and they've had those same weapons. Wellington minus CMC. Okay, so if we want to say CMC is a difference this year, then I guess I can't totally push back against that in completion in totality. But at the same time, other people have had Debo's. They've had a Raheem Mostert, who's not as electric as CMC, but he's still speedy. He's still solid. I mean, we saw him this year in Miami. He's still a good player. And
yeah.
the 49ers have had Raheem Mosterts in their running back room, and they had George Kittle. So they've had those same weapons, and they've not made it to the Super Bowl. Or if they made it to the Super Bowl, they fell short. So to me, it's like it's him and Jimmy G. So I mean, he hasn't gotten there, Shanahan, with other quarterbacks, and Jimmy G only made it once for all the years that he had Jimmy G as his quarterback. So, to me, you got to give him his flowers at this point. And even if he loses, then it's still great for him. And if they win for sure, then I don't know what people who are hating on him so much are going to do, unless it just ends up being a game where CMC just carries them and ends up like people are going to lose their minds. Wellington, if they beat the Chiefs and he's Super Bowl MVP, Brock Purdy,
They're
like
going to lose
people
their
people
minds.
will not have a leg to stand on at
Oh
that
my
point because it's
goodness,
like
man.
Mystery Relevant becomes Super Bowl MVP. What are you going to do at that point?
Well, listeners, say we're going to take a quick break because Mr. Savon Morris, he's waiting to come in. The moment of truth, where we got a lot of questions for him. So we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Be right back, y'all.